Good evening. My name is Now. I welcome you to Autism Spectrum Australia's Assistive Technology Event. Dr. Trevor Clark is about to open the proceedings. Over to you, Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Now, for that lovely introduction, and to all of you for coming out tonight on a Friday night. We have got a very good session for you, so we do hope you enjoy it and it was worth the trek and, putting off your partying or whatever you do on a Friday evening. So, thank you very much for joining us. Just before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who have occupied this land for thousands of years and on whose land we meet here today, and pay respect to their elders, past, present and future. So on behalf of Autism Spectrum Australia, or ASPECT for short, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone here tonight and a very special welcome to our panellists. We have the four of them ready and raring to partake and, share their knowledge with us. So thank you everyone for coming along tonight. I think as you now introduce me, so I'm currently the director of the ASPECT research program, which is in a very exciting position to have, and I have some of our staff here tonight, including Dr. Susan Bruck, who is the sidekick to now having recently joined our research team as well. Hasn't he, Susan? Only a few months ago, so we classify him as one of our research team now. We have a really exciting lineup of professionals and experts in the field of assistive technologies, autism and education here for you tonight. I think most of you will come away with a new sense of knowledge and what is possible, particularly around this very important topic. Assistive technologies are becoming increasingly prevalent in our increasingly connected world, particularly in our education systems, where we are finding more and more useful technology to enhance learning. We're also becoming increasingly aware of the importance of assistive technology in the autism community, how it can be used not just to assist, but also to enable our young people, adults on the autism spectrum. It is estimated there's between about 30 to 50% of individuals with autism who do not actually use functional speech. So you can see the very important role that assistive technology can play in enabling communication and learning. So you will learn and hear a lot about that tonight from our panellists. ASPECT has been working in this area for quite a few years now, employing a range of evidence-informed assistive technologies in our schools and services to promote learning and understanding. And we're a slightly unusual organisation. We're a national autism service provider, but we're very fortunate to actually also have a research arm or department that undertakes research to evaluate our own but other programs, interventions, practices to make sure we provide the best possible services and individuals for people that come to ASPECT first, but also to support the wider field of autism research. ASPECT also promotes research at state and national levels and facilitates tertiary students' research. As our aim is to develop a strong evidence-based approach to our programs, our aim is, and to support individuals with autism. Really, I should say that the whole aim of our research is to result in better outcomes for our people on the spectrum, and it's really important, and I know that Liz Pellicano would support this, that when we undertake any research we actually partner with people on the spectrum, their families, carers, etc., to make sure that we've actually got the right priorities in our research. And also at the end of our research, it's not a project that's printed in academic journal something that truly makes a difference or has a positive outcome for the lives of our children and adults. So really that's our whole purpose for our Aspect research program. It's about better outcomes for our people. And, that's our mission, our aim. And the best way to do that is work in partnership from the beginning, the very first ideas about what needs to be researched, how we can do that, and right to the end when we are, translating the outcomes research to the wider autism community. And I think currently an example in our organisation is we have two autistic research assistants who are working on our team, and they have been 18 months, is it Susan? Almost 2 years? Yeah, and their contribution is extremely valuable to our research work and programs. So just an example of that in Aspect. One of the technologies that we've had a huge role in trialling in the past and is still very much being used in our schools today is the language acquisition through motor planning. Some of you may have heard of it, LAMP, L-A-M-P for short. This program we originally trialled, piloted in Aspect 2010 to 11, with further research undertaken by Aspect, clearly showing the importance of LAMP to sustained increase in communication for students on the autism spectrum. The LAMP is now running in 3 of our Aspect schools, with 51 of 135 students at our South Coast school having been prescribed a LAMP device, and we're currently training others across Australia. So I think we've got a short video clip of the LAMP project.
Put on neck.
Put on his neck. And last,
put on face. Sad.
show me. Oh, he's crying. Sad.
Cat
Good job. The cat
is in the. The cat is in the.
Yeah, it's in the dam, isn't it?
D. A. M. The cat is in the dam.
The cat is in the dam. Fantastic.
I'd like now to hand over to your actual host for the evening, Thomas Kuzma, who you met earlier on, who will begin our panel discussion. So welcome, Thomas, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trevor Clark. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Thomas Kuzma. I'm a next week I'll be a 28-year-old person on the spectrum, having delivered talks across all over Australia and in America. I have been advocating for over 10 years. And I'm not only that, but a mentor and a teacher's aide for students on the spectrum. And I have been discussing what it's like to be autistic on such shows as 10's Eyewitness News. I was one of the good guys, I swear. A Current Affair, SBS Insight. I was just on Small Business Secrets on Saturday. And A Matter of Fact with Stan Grant. As a person that has lived through a variety of instances that have... Let me start that again. Being autistic, I have faced a variety of challenges and moments of great hardship. And something that has always come back to me was the fact that I always had something like video games or my phone or some kind of technology to turn to. When my parents and my teachers were talking about the great Catholicism and Jesus and God and all that, I was busy going, yeah, but what happened to Optimus Prime in Transformers? And so for me, I found that my way of learning came through the games and the technologies that I enjoyed so much. So when I teach nowadays, I see the importance that it has on the people just like myself in school today. So we've got an excellent group of guest speakers for you guys today, and I shall say them right now. We've got Alex Sugurel. Did I say that right?
Almost.
I always get those names wrong. Who's visiting from Boston, Boston Roboticist and an adjunct researcher at Curtin University. You've got Professor Liz Pellicano from Macquarie University and previous director of the Centre for Research in Autism and Education, Carell, at University College of London. Associate Professor Matt Bauer, Educational Specialist, also from Macquarie University, and Craig Smith, who is the Positive Partnerships Project Manager, Autism Educator, Learning Designer, Sound Artist, Author, Creator, and a fellow Minecrafter. So that's good. So I was wondering if, before we get started on the questions, I was wondering if you guys could talk to us about how you work with either robotics or assistive technologies, and what your area of expertise in these fields may be.
Sounds good. I'm going to start. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Sugurel, and I am based in Boston, Massachusetts, which is about 24 hours away. So we might be experiencing some technical difficulties due to the jet lag. In Boston, I have the pleasure of working for the company that produces the Now robots, which we just saw earlier, as well as the Pepper robots. And here I work as part of the engineering team as a product manager to develop different types of applications and make sure that the interaction and user experience, as well as the technical tasks, are delivered properly on the robot. I'm also working currently with Curtin University on a very exciting research project on assistive technologies and how they can help individuals with autism and children to communicate better, as well as be more comfortable and happier in our society. And I'm also attending a research project at Harvard to advance instructional design for special education. Now, my journey here has been a little bit of a roller coaster. I grew up in Romania in a place where, at the time that I was deciding to pursue my studies, women in technology was still a topic that was a little bit taboo. But luckily, I did get the chance to study internationally due to a scholarship. And today I went back to Romania and I helped co-found an association called EDACT, IDDSET, and it's helping individuals on the spectrum to pursue their education, as well as empower girls that want to pursue careers in technology. So robotics is my personal passion, and I'm very happy to be here today. Pleasure to meet all of you, and thank you so much for welcoming me at this event.
Thank you. Liz.
Thanks so much, Alex. So I'm Liz Pellicano. I'm a developmental and educational psychologist, essentially who's interested in the way that autistic people, children, young people and adults view and interpret the world around them, how that has an impact, or how those differences might have an impact on people's everyday lives, so at home, at school, at work, out and about in the community, and importantly, how we might support individuals best. As Trevor said, I'm particularly interested in in partnering with autistic people and their allies in the research process. So my previous research has found that a lot of the research, autism research that gets done, tends to be all about what causes autism and tends not to be about what people really want to be able to support them in the here and now. So things like education and supports and interventions and strategies. And so my work is trying to better build that bridge to try and do research that actually matters and makes a difference to autistic people. This kind of research doesn't really happen enough. So we know that autistic people, their family members, educators and clinicians are rarely involved in the research process beyond just being a participant or subject in research. And this is especially true for technology-related research and practice. So that's important for tonight's discussion. I also lead a team at University College London as part of a very large-scale $7 million European-funded project looking to see whether a robot, which is not now, it's a different robot called Zeno, whether Zeno can help support autistic children in classrooms in London and Serbia, actually. The children that we're working with, they're the children with high support needs, so they have additional intellectual disabilities and often very little to no spoken communication. And what has become, and the project is almost finishing, it's a 3.5-year project, so we're coming to the end. And I think what the biggest lesson we've learnt from that project is how important it has been to involve teachers and, where possible, the children themselves in the initial to provide initial and ongoing input to what Zeno should do, how it should teach or support children with educators in classrooms. So that's kind of one thing, and I can talk about that later on, but that's one of the big, I think one of the big lessons we've learned from that particular project. So,
amazing. Look out now. Matthew.
Thanks. Yeah, hi, Matt Bauer, Macquarie University. So I've had a really sort of roundabout pathway to be here. I started as an actuary. I'm not sure if you know what those people do. They're like maths of insurance. So the furthest probably thing that I could have sort of been to what I am now. But I always wanted, I felt that wasn't right because I wanted to do something sort of a bit worthwhile and thought, I was really inspired by my maths teacher. It was really an inspirational educator. Are there teachers in the room? Have we got any? There's a few teachers in the room. So I spent several years as a maths teacher, but became hooked on technologies. It was sort of the late 90s, and saw that there were so many things that you could do to enhance learning and teaching using technology. So I went back and I was going to write maths software actually, and so I studied computing and everything, but then ended up teaching some programming courses at university, and then studying how to use technology just to enhance learning and teaching of computing, which then led to me getting a job teaching teachers how to integrate technology in the classroom. So my responsibility at the moment is to research and teach in the area of technology-enhanced learning. And broadly, it's not just autism, it's the real challenge that everyday teachers face is sometimes you'll have gifted and talented students, sometimes you'll have specific disciplines or specific, though, special needs that you need to cater to. And I'm fascinated by that challenge of, first of all, how we can design for learners using technology and cater to their specific needs. And also, though, how we can best support educators to design well with technologies, because that's a really big challenge. There's so much to conceptualise. There's keeping on top of all of the technologies that are out there, which is a huge task in itself. Being able to sort of interpret and understand what the affordances of those technologies are and how they might relate to the needs of the people that you're trying to teach. There's a whole discipline area or topic area, and understanding what technologies are going to be well suited to that topic area. And then, of course, there's the whole pedagogy. There's different ways that you might have students engage with it, and they might be totally responsive to one way and entirely unresponsive to another way. Coming from, looking at sort of some of my colleagues in sort of chemistry, they do an experiment and do research here in Sydney and other colleagues in Botswana, and they're going to get pretty similar results if they account for temperature. You can be in two classrooms that are side by side and get incredibly different results using the same technology and the same sort of instructional approach, but just based on the actual individuals in the room, or just doing things slightly different way. So we have to be really careful when we use technology, I believe, because it amplifies things. And I might talk a bit more about some of that later. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
And Craig.
Thanks, Thomas. I think the Minecrafter part's probably my favourite part of your introduction. So I'm Craig. I am a school teacher from up in Newcastle, and I've worked in schools for children with autism. I currently work for Positive Partnerships, national training for parents and carers and teachers around the country. Part of the Apple Distinguished Educator team and the Apple Accessibility team, so looking at the way, I guess, that everyday tech in our pockets can meet accessibility needs and assistive technology goals. I think I like really creative ways of using tech, often ways in which it's not necessarily at first meant to be used, but you can bend it enough and get messy enough to do some really interesting things with it. I think one of the big focuses for me is around the strengths and interests of young people on the spectrum and the way in which technology can heighten their capacity to have access to what they love. I think of a student who I was just very lucky, he's forefront in my mind because I was very lucky to catch up with him the other day. I first taught him when he was 4 years old, and I can remember his first day at school, and he said, he wouldn't come in. He said, I'm the sort of boy who's not meant for the classroom. Don't make me come into this school. And from then, now he's an 18-year-old young man, and to see his journey through a dialogue with his teachers where we started to learn a lot more about what it was that he loved. What he loved was dance music. He was a fanatic for dance music. He loved Kylie Minogue. He made a paper mache head of Kylie Minogue once and had little popsicle sticks coming out of it with his face, and he called it Can't Get You Out of My Mind. And he just totally dug that world, and we had to meet him at that level, and so our learning experiences, maths, English, if we had have said, we're going to do a spelling test on Monday morning, he would have been the first one out of the room. But if we said, you know what, we're going to do a storytelling exercise, we're going to use music, we're going to use the rhythms of these beats, we're going to use synthesizers, we can work some Kylie Minogue in there as well, and we suddenly had a really engaging experience. Long story short, he's graduated high school, he's now a professional remixer, mastering tracks, he's just done a safety video soundtrack that was so upbeat and energetic that the Ministry of Sound are going to include it on one of their new albums. So he's doing really cool stuff. So I think that's where my interest is, and increasingly the ethics of technology and the way in which we don't take people out of the equation. I think there's a particular trajectory where technology could come to replace the human experience, and I think we want to try at all levels to not do that. So I think we just want to see the balance, because the world of autism is very different to a lot of other ways of experiencing life. On some levels it's very similar, but we just want to make sure we get the ethical, existential, human stuff balanced and nice, and that's I guess what we'll talk about in part 2. But yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Excellent. Now, before we get into the thick of it, I must say this. I'm sure many of you have questions here tonight, but we're going to go in through some panel questions first, and then you guys can eagerly eat away at that food for thought that you have. So let's get into it. So, Alex, can you tell me what are some of the innovative assistive technologies and why they are so important?
I sure can. One particular teaching tool that I had growing up was video games. So actually, there was this very neat platform on Heroes of Might and Magic Free, and it was a map builder. So you could actually create your own quests and develop your own maps. And for me at the time, growing up, that was a version of Scratch. If you can imagine different teaching tools today, like Scratch, or Kodu, Blockly, at the time, this map editor was my portal to learn how to eventually code. So I think the application of technologies in our learning experience is very, very important, especially if it's something that can gather your interest and help you pursue different passions by acting as a platform. Today, I work with robotics, and I'm a big fan of robots, so I am going to advocate robots as a teaching tool, especially for special education. And in one particular research program we had with Now is called Ask Now, and the robot would go in classrooms and interact with the children in order to practice different skills such as memorization, social skills, object labeling, and we discovered that the robot captured the attention of the children quite remarkably. So together with a dedicated team of engineers, as well as teachers, special education therapists, as well as parents, because again, the community is very important when developing a tool for an individual with autism. So together with this wonderful action team of superheroes, we started looking at different applications on the robot that would integrate therapies such as ABA, TEACH, PECS, and transfer this experience through the robot in the classrooms so that it would properly engage the children and see how we can customize the educative experience to each child individually. So that was a very exciting project, and that's why I advocate robotics as one of the new innovative tools for special education.
Nice, like there was more to it than meets the eye.
Yes, there was, indeed.
So we'll move on.
Autobots roll out.
Yeah. But I'll do the universal greeting, but I think we don't have enough time for that. Liz, why are assistive technologies so important for people on the autism spectrum?
Yeah, good question.
Well, I didn't write it.
You've got to take the compliment, Thomas. So assistive technologies have, I think, huge potential in supporting autistic children, young people, and adults. And I think technologies like the internet, apps for autistic people, robots, as we'll see, have been particularly appealing for autistic people, I think for two main reasons. There might well be other reasons too, but for two reasons in particular. And one is that technologies are generally more predictable than human interactions. And interactions with technologies that also allow people more control over those interactions. So there's two things, predictability and perceived control over the interactions. So I'll just give you an example. So with regard to predictability, if I want to, for example, if I'm teaching young autistic children how to recognise emotions, so happy, angry, sad, scared, if I make the same happy face twice, I can guarantee it's not going to be exactly the same. It's going to be minute differences. I'll try very hard to do it the same, but there'll be tiny differences in the way that I express that emotion. And that might be particularly challenging for autistic children to be able to pick up, to be able to label both of those kind of variations of what happy might be as happy. A robot, however, can produce exactly the same emotion or expression of happy every single time. And so that kind of lack of variability is inherently more predictable and potentially will allow the children to learn more effectively about emotions. So that's the first example of predictability and why predictability might be particularly important with regard to technologies. But the second is around control. So there was a recent survey of autistic adults. There's not very much research on how autistic people use technology, any technology, but there is one study on a survey with more able, intellectually able autistic adults on how they use technology. And one of the big reasons they use it is because they can control their interactions. So the interactions are, they can control, what they do with the technology, who they interact with, how they interact. So they can, in a face-to-face interaction, you've got lots of things going on. You've got verbal, non-verbal information, all of which you had to integrate on the fly. Whereas in a chat room or whatever, that is all controlled, and you can choose to delay what you say. You can choose to think about what you say. So it's much more controlled. So I think that's why those two things, the increased predictability of those interactions, and also the perceived control over those interactions, can potentially be really supportive and empowering for people on the spectrum.
Amazing, thank you. Now, Matt, we've talked about robotics and expectations, but can you tell us about the ways that educators can use current technologies to assist autistic children?
Another great question.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you.
Okay. So, it's really, really fascinating to dive into this. And I was exploring around, knowing that I was coming to talk today, exploring around, looking at some of the tools that are out there. And so if people are educators, and I'll try and be quite specific in some way. So one of the main ways these days that technology is being used in classrooms and just generally in education is obviously through iPads and iPad apps. And when I was looking around, there's actually, you might think, oh, well, there might not be so much that caters to autism. But once you start sort of breaking it down and analysing and what are the actual needs of autistic people, then there are actually hundreds and hundreds of apps that cater to different aspects of needs of people with autistic conditions. So, and here's just sort of a list of some of the sorts of apps that have been recommended for autistic. And I'll give you also some links to directories where you can pick up some apps if you are interested in these things. So I'll just describe them as the sorts of things that they do. So, for instance, if people need support with behavioural aspects of their interaction, social interaction, and also sort of managing their time. So there are lots of apps for autism and also just general apps that help with scheduling and work management, making decisions. A visual calendar might be a great way for someone with autism who struggles with reading, or timers, counters, apps that sort of teach about specific things, like provide speech prompts so that when you're interacting, you can learn how the sorts of things that you might be appropriate for different situations. With social skills, things like social comprehension. So video-based scenarios. So what Liz was saying about, the fact that it can sort of be done in the right way and then replayed and revisited. There's also a lot of creative apps too, and I'm really a big fan of moving beyond sort of receptive, sort of instruction-based apps, but things that helps learners be more creative and sort of hit on more higher order thinking skills. So having students create narratives, doing storytelling through apps, comic strip creation where they can sort of reduce the amount of complexity in what they're trying to communicate. There's rafts of literacy and numeracy apps, so phonics, spelling, sight words, and language apps. For the senses of people struggling with senses, understanding cause and effect, things that might help them to concentrate better, so to train their concentration and attention and focusing. And also with emotional regulation, emotional vocabulary, even keeping like a mood diary. There's an app for that. So amongst all of these apps, and I'll just give you a couple of links if you're interested. There's one called the Learning App Guide, which is actually on the Autism Spectrum Australia website, or a link to it. There's another one called understood.org, and understood.org, you can put in the actual need, and then that they'll direct you to all sorts of technologies, not just for apps. So that's an incredible array of technologies just with the iPad. And building on what Liz was saying about, why is that a useful technology, or why is the technology useful? There's the control elements. iPads are particularly good also because they support visually based learning, and they give you the ability to switch on or off or cater to particular modalities. So if someone is particularly responsive to audio, like the student you were talking, then you can enhance the audio and maybe even pull back on the visual. Or if they need a visual mode of communication, then the app can cater to that. But critical to all of this, obviously, is the teacher understanding the student's need very well. So I think we're a long way from the idea that we're going to hand over to technology, and we need to see the technology as the mediator, and critical in that relationship is the teacher understanding the student and being aware of the apps and understanding how to bundle that in a way that's appropriate for the student. Just one other technology that I would like to raise as a very interesting one is immersive virtual reality. So this isn't maybe something that would be used so much in schools at the moment, but there's actually quite a lot of research that's looking into what happens when you, instead of, you've got the technology, but there's still the world around us. If people with autism struggle to focus their concentration or overwhelmed with sort of extreme social situations, then what about if we put them into an environment where their sensory input caters to specifically and caters to their needs and shuts out those things that they might find difficult to deal with. So I might stop there and I'll come back into it when we get further into the session.
It's amazing because you mentioned the comic book strips and the games using for communications, all stuff that I'm using as a mentor. And I keep a mood diary as well. That's why I did the whole booyah. Anyway, now, Craig, what kind of assistive technologies should we be focusing on?
Everyone's been saying they've been good questions. I'm going to hold you personally responsible and say that's a bad question, Thomas. No, I'm joking. That's perfect. It's so lovely just hearing all of these wonderful things being shared. I think I was actually just thinking about what Matt was saying too around the utility of iPads, and maybe this is sort of foreshadowing some stuff we can talk about later, but I think it's interesting to me with iPads were one of the first real representations of what you could do in the classroom beyond having a computer. Something that was mobile, you wasn't attached down to a desk, you could take it outside, you could go into the garden, you could hook it up to a microscope, you could put it in the dirt, you could do all these really interesting creative things. And I think a lot of people knew how to use it because only 1 or 2, 3 years before they had their first iPhone or they had their first whatever smartphone, and suddenly all the gestures, the swipes, the downloading of the apps, the pinching, the pulling, the photos, making movies, we'd sort of already entered that world. So I think there was a level of understanding that made the utility of iPads something that we all became very familiar with. I think that was a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing in that they're wonderful. They can do some very cool stuff with them. It was maybe a curse because some people, I think, stopped realising what the potentials could be if they pushed it further beyond what they would otherwise do with their smartphone. And I think we need to really keep drilling down into saying these things are bottomless pits of creativity as long as we know how to keep exploring, doing what Matt said too about getting teachers into this sort of problem-solving space where they're identifying the individual needs of their students, how do we tailor these things in particular ways. So I think that's, for me, a thing that we need to keep thinking about is how do we take technologies that we think, oh, well, I know how that works, but just making it new to us all the time so we can constantly reinvent the way that we use them. I think I'm really interested in stuff that we can bring into the classroom to give students the agency over making their own things. Again, I feel like I'm echoing things that have been said, but rather than just being on the receptive end of technology, you think, how do we upskill students to become makers, to become their own authors of what they want to create and be a part of, whether that is learning the language of coding. I mean, there's a beautiful app on the iPad now called Swift Playgrounds that really visually game-based teaches, just a free app, teaches the language of Swift coding. Swift is then the language that you can use to make apps with later, but you go through a little gamification process, you end up with the foundations of knowing how to code in Swift. I think that stuff is very cool. Stuff like Arduino, Raspberry Pi, Makey, little microcomputers that you can start to code, program with, and you think, don't just see it from a computer science standpoint where you think we want students to learn to code so they can go into coding jobs. You think, no, we want to learn to code, to learn how to think, to learn problem-solving strategies, take big problems, break them down into smaller components, and if we make our classrooms these sorts of spaces, I mean, this for me is maybe, again, building on some of the things we've heard. I think there's almost a split in that there's assistive technology for addressing core competencies, visual scheduling, social emotional, focusing on behavioural, communicative needs, and then there's this other space that's all about creative, learning, experimental, let's explore. And I think where those things cross over is probably in the autism space, where a lot of really interesting fireworks start to happen, and we can sort of see where things go from there.
Excellent, thank you so much. And now we're back to Alex. So, can you give us a sense of what is happening in the field of robotics?
The field of robotics is advancing. How many of you have seen Westworld, the series?
Yeah, bits of it.
I definitely see some hands up.
Don't get me started.
We're not there yet. Robotics is a field that's currently advancing. However, we have all of these conceptions from the media that robots are very competent to do certain things that come easy to humans. For instance, manipulation for us is a task that's quite intuitive. Robots are not there yet. We have robots that can be controlled. We have robots that can be applied in automation, and they can make our jobs safer as well as produce things faster. There are robots that can perform amazing surgeries, and they are operated by a doctor, and they can be minimally invasive and save lives and shorten the recovery period for people. There are robots that can be transporting us from place to place. They're not transforming into a robot yet,
Not yet.
but they can definitely help us localize from one place to another. There are robots that are applied in education that are very compatible with STEM, and based on different applications, you inspire newer generations to go into sciences and engineering fields, as well as robots for special education that I mentioned earlier as well, and are currently being tested to see how efficient they can be for different individuals. So I'm very excited about the field. I think it's going to open more and more as time progresses. I'm also very excited about seeing the media response to it, but I would personally like to see a development of robotics more in the sense of things like Bicentennial Man rather than Terminator. But I think that is something that, we are products of our environment. So when our perception is influenced, we tend to go in a direction that is predefined. So if we grow up seeing robots as vicious machines, then probably we are going to develop machines that will eventually, even though they start off with good intentions, they might be applicable to not so good intentions. But if we see things like androids, like Data, for example, or Bicentennial Man, then we also try to paint a better future where we integrate robotics as social companions. And this is one field that for me is a key point in the future, social robotics. How can robots be integrated in our lives to make our existence easier, and what are the potential applications? Besides companionship and education, there is a need for providing assistance in elderly homes, for instance. As populations increase and there's not enough work supply to be there for people that are aging, we do need a tool and a machine that can not only provide the basic assistance and basic functionality, but also provide the companionship and pleasant interaction that all of us social creatures need to thrive.
Like in Robot and the Frank and the Robot, yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness, thank you for mentioning that. If you guys haven't seen Frank and Robot, you should absolutely watch it. It's a beautiful movie.
Big Hero 6 somewhat meets Ocean's 11 meets an old guy and a robot.
Actually, that describes it perfectly.
So Matt, what can educators hope for and expect from technology in the future to help autistic children?
Okay. Well, there's sort of two levels to that. So the first one is what sort of, in maybe the short to medium term, and then let's sort of get really moonshot thinking and what might we hope for eventually.
Would it help if I had an upgrade or something like that? I can use a magic, no.
Yeah, that's right. Just plug into the brain and yes. So look, I think, and it sort of builds on comments that have just been made. The whole idea of artificial intelligence, and just whether it's artificial or not, but just intelligence built into software to help with all sorts of things to do with autism. So diagnosis, identifying needs of people, identifying strategies, helping to identify technologies even. All of these things technology will continue to get better at doing all of those things. And thinking about two different sorts of technologies, there's the sort of technology that helps to sort of compensate for maybe an area of difficulty that someone might be experiencing. So an example of that is they've done studies about using augmented reality to help people navigate. If you hand someone with autism a map in the city, they might sort of struggle to orient themselves. But if it's augmented reality, and I think we're going to see some examples of augmented reality later, and they're actually being sort of directed by the technology in situ without the sort of the mental manipulation that it might need, then that helps them, and they showed that there are better outcomes that come from that. But another one that's sort of, I think, more interesting, and often, I'm glad to say, more prevalent based on my reading of the research, is those that are helping people to develop their capabilities. And so I've already mentioned the idea of using immersive virtual reality, but also augmented reality and this idea of mixed reality, where augmented reality and virtual reality sort of combine. So a lot of it's digitally simulated, but there's also some real world elements into it. So what if we get to a point where, and this is sort of starting to get to some green fields thinking, what if we get to a point where there are cameras in this room and that exactly what's happening here is turned into a 3D model in real time? So actually, you could be wearing some glasses and you're not actually seeing the real version of what's in the room, but you're seeing a digital representation of it. But maybe if you've got autism, the sound that's coming from over here, because you could also be wearing sort of ear pods, and that could be mediated as well, and also visually disturbing things that are happening on that side of the room, and the technology could actually blank those disturbing media out. Yeah.
Just reassuring them.
There's some very exciting possibilities when you start to use augmented and virtual reality to overlay and adjust the modalities in real time. And I think that would be potentially a very exciting future area. But there's also, with all of this too, there's just so much research that needs to be done alongside that. And we don't want to just be trying to sort of compensate and just, pull out those things that autistic people find difficult, but also, I suppose, be helping them to deal with that. And so there might be guides or augmented reality or virtual reality assistance and guides and that help develop their skills, simulations and whatnot. And I think that's an area that's continuing to evolve and one to watch for future technologies.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Liz, there are so many great technologies that exist in the world of today, but we don't exactly see them in our classrooms and in our houses and workplaces or at home. Now, why is that?
I think there are lots of reasons for that.
Oh, there is? Okay.
But just picking up on what Matt and Craig have said in terms of that, because one of the studies that we've done, just to give you an example of how they might not be used in our everyday context, we did a study in London for our broader robot project on with teachers in special schools in London. We did focus groups, basically tried to understand, what technologies do they use in the classroom, why do they use them, so what function do they serve, and essentially how do they think the children respond, so how effective do they think these technologies are. And the iPad in particular, so lots of them used iPads, but they weren't being used for cool app or creative apps or anything like that. They were essentially being used as a reward for when children had done something. So that was their 5 minutes at the end of whatever they were meant to do. They got their iPad, and so that's a great example of technology being misused, or maybe not misused because that's a good use as well. But not used in its most creative sense. And I think there are. I think there are lots of reasons why there's a kind of what I think of as a lack of translation between the technology, the knowledge, and then practice, how it's actually deployed or implemented. And one of those is that a lot of research on these technologies and the development of them, except in Alex's lab, obviously, is that they don't necessarily involve autistic people, so children, young people or adults, and educators and family members in the design process. So the idea should be that we're getting them right in the inkling of an idea. We kind of get them together, we kind of nut it out together, and we design it so we understand what their real life contexts are like and try to design a technology that meets those, their needs in those contexts. And I think that doesn't happen nearly enough, okay? So that's one reason why I think there's this kind of lack of translation from knowledge to practice. And the second reason is, I think, and this is researchers to blame here, I think researchers don't evaluate these technologies. So all these technologies are often put out, so there's thousands of apps, there's lots of robots, but they're very rarely rigorously evaluated. So we don't actually know a lot of the times whether they do what they say on the tin. Okay, and when they are evaluated, they often use very small samples, so 6 to 8 children in a study, and we all know how different autistic children and young people can be from one another. So 6 or 8 children not going to really tell us very much, and they don't tend to kind of use appropriate controls or other kind of more rigorous measures. And I think that's a real limitation, particularly which limits the take-up of educators or families actually going, okay, I know what this is meant to do, and I know it's going to work in my context. I just don't think that we know that information, unfortunately.
Some interesting topics raised. Thank you so much. Lastly, we've got Craig again. Now, what are some of the hurdles that might be preventing assistive technologies from being used?
I was just thinking, just thinking of some stuff that's been said too, maybe just before we get to the hurdles, and maybe it's part of it, maybe it's part of the conversation. I was just thinking about some stuff that Matt was just saying a moment ago about artificial intelligence side of things. We were just having a conversation the other week where one of our colleagues has just been into hospital. She's had eye surgery done, so she's going through a particular recovery period, and she was saying, it's really lovely that I know how to use my iPhone, my iPad, whatever, really well, my laptop, because I've set them all up with assistive technology supports, accessibility, so the emails are being read out to me. I've got the capacity to dictate what I'd like to say, and she was doing all these things, and we said, well, that's true. And this lady is an assistive technology teacher, so she knows all this stuff really well. We said, what if, say, my mum had the same eye surgery, and who knows very little, hi mum, about technology, but she, has a very poor understanding of that. She's not going to have the same benefit from using this stuff as the person who knows it very well. And I think that translates sometimes into the classrooms. And hooking back to AI, I think we're starting to see some really interesting things where, say, your smartphone, these days they're using this sort of front-facing camera to scan your face and unlock your phone, and it's all very cool and clever. But you think about the capacity of that camera, which is very detailed, very accurate. Think of machine learning algorithms that you could have inside of that to capture the way the eyes are moving, to capture the capacity or lack of for the eyes to track text and to see things on the screen. And think in the background of the hardware, we're going to make all the settings adjustments. We're going to do that automatically to best capacitate what this individual needs to best use the tech involved. So someone like my mum, who's not going to go back into the settings and do all those little accessibility things, she will have that automatically happen when it tracks. You translate that into the classroom, and when you think about things at the moment on, say, the iPad, where you can set up manually things like colour filters, if there's particular ways in which you want to adjust the white balance, the tone, the contrast, the clarity. What if all that was automatically happening? So when a child gets a particular text to read, instead of having for them to need to know how to use it, the teachers to know how to use it, it's all being done through machine learning in the background. I think that sort of stuff would be very interesting, and very interesting to see that evolve, so that our capacity to overcome the hurdles is not necessarily always focused on upskilling and training, but we're working in collaboration with maybe the tech getting smarter and smarter to help us get to that point too. The only other thing that I might just say about the sort of hurdle aspect is building on what Liz just mentioned about the collaboration of all stakeholders and parties involved. I mean, any time that we have done iPad implementation in schools or tech implementation in schools, we get the parents and we all sit down at a big table, treat it like a sandpit fashion. The teachers, we say, listen, our teachers don't know this stuff any better than you do. We are all constructing this knowledge together. Let's learn how these apps work at the same time, and let's talk about things like how would you problem solve using a social story on an app if you get to the shopping centre and it doesn't quite respond, it doesn't do the right thing. How are we going to problem solve how to get through this? So we've always got little backup plans and we know how to do stuff. So I think you do it with parents, you do it with teachers, you do it with support staff, you do it with kids, you do it with leadership, you do it with everybody that you could possibly get involved. You all pretend you know nothing, you construct it from there, and then hopefully you all reach a really interesting shared understanding that's not navigated by guru sort of expert leadership. It's just something you build yourself in really interesting ways.
Just to quickly add on to that, usually we go and we're too proud to say we need help, and so that's one of the major things that has come from the autism community, that it's okay to ask for help. And you might look like an idiot, but once you know what it looks like and you know how to do it, then it's not really being an idiot. So do we have time for closing comments, or should we move straight into the audience questions? Audience questions time. All right, let's see some hands raising. Don't worry, I don't bite, only nibble. But they're the ones that are answering the questions. Oh, they're a little shy tonight, aren't they? Oh, you do? Okay, well, I will bring this.
I don't know if I need the microphone. I'm just wondering, if assistive technology, on a scale of 1 to 100, if 100 is you can drop your children off in the morning with a teacher who's a robot and know that everything's going to be fine and they're going to get an amazing education, or you've got the chalkboard at the other end, where are we, do you think, now? Are we a quarter of the way there? I know it's how long?
It feels like a Richter scale going back and forward all the time, I think. Sometimes it feels like we're eating into the future, like, oh my gosh, augmented reality, Pokemon Go, we're walking around the streets and other people are catching Pikachu, like that feels amazing. And you think this is the future, and then the next day you think, oh my gosh, we're back at 10%, like we realise how much further we could go. I think for me, it feels like a constant back and forth. And people come up with ideas like all these wearable technology, monitoring emotional regulation, biofeedback. You think that is so cool. And then say, how close are we for that to be actively working stuff? And they say, well, maybe 20 years. Maybe you think, all right, so we've got the concepts, we're not quite there, but then other stuff is real. And some stuff becomes real and then disappears, like Google Glasses. They were doing social skill overlaying, augmented reality, facial expression. What does this expression mean? Social emotional feedback, and then suddenly, it's off the market, and then so things feel like they were here and then they're back there again. So, which I think is good. It's good to have that flexibility of the back and forth, and we just see how we keep track.
No one wanted to look like Vegeta, right? It's Dragon Ball Z. Who's next?
But if I can add something as well, this is definitely a topic that requires a lot of thinking. It's also important to consider the cultural and geographical location, right? Because some places in the world have more resources to integrate technology on a day-to-day basis, not only in the educational system, but also in the day-to-day life of people in that place. But culture, location, contribute a lot to how to determining where we are on that scale. But I actually do agree that sometimes we go like a roller coaster in between. We advance a bit, then we go back, mostly because of the way that the technology is designed. First of all, it can be a little bit scary for some people to use, especially people that are not yet used to computers, for example. If you introduce very innovative tools in the classroom, immediately they will be intimidated. So there is a learning curve and also a curve to adapt and get comfortable with the tool. And there's also, we need to take in account the fact that sometimes from a cultural standpoint, people might not be comfortable with technology yet. So technology needs to be more accessible in terms of user interface. Design something that all users of all backgrounds can use. We need to understand the cultural localization and how flexible the particular environment is to integrate the technological tool. And it also needs to be financially accessible, because in a lot of places around the world, we're still having issues like getting drinkable water or getting energy. Energy. The jet lag is coming out. Be ready, everyone. It's emerging. I'm just kidding. So yes, that's mine. I'm done.
That is good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love hearing everything that was spoken about. I have a child, he's about to turn 12, and he's autistic and he's deeply digital. I have an amazing experience of watching him use a huge variety of tools. He speaks 7 code languages. He's doing incredible things. School isn't keeping up with him, and the access that he has to the technology and the way that the technology is used in his school environment, in a mainstream school, is not keeping up with him. And I'm constantly in two minds, and I'm sure there's others in the room who feel this way, because I believe it's now the most commonly fought over topic in marriages is how much is too much. So I guess on the one hand, I see this boy who flies in this space, who can do incredible things, who can use this technology creatively, and he's comfortable, it's predictable. I get all of that. But on the other hand, you think, well, we're also seeing emerging studies around 2 hours of screen time being a suggested maximum after which there is some sort of brain impact. What does that mean in this context? Because I oscillate. Simultaneously, I've got a boy who's completely soccer obsessed, and I would not think twice about letting him play in a park for 4 hours with the ball. But my deeply digital boy, I worry as soon as I'm at that 2 hour mark. So what is your guides on this, and how do we navigate this as parents? And in a school context, we've got children now spending 25 plus hours in school premises on screens, plus homework. So those 2 hour daily recommendations are already blown right out of the water for anybody who's in a school environment on screen. So I'm really keen to get your thoughts on this oscillating pendulum of acceptance of assistive technology vis-a-vis recommendations on daily access.
What a good question.
Yeah, very
really
good
cool.
one, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And so, and complex too, obviously. So, first of all, to say that not all technology use is the same. And I suppose starting with the physiological. So soon, the main reason, personally, as a parent and as an educator, to straight away say no, that's too much, is if there is physiological implications of the amount of technology that someone's using. So as a parent, you need to be looking at what's happening and is, for instance, the health and happiness of my child actually going down as a result of using more technology throughout the day. Having said that, obviously it's something that might even energise your child often, and so if there are no physiological downsides to it, then yeah, I think that it sounds like it's something that is building his esteem and confidence and happiness. But there will be a point where it does become too much, and so as the parent, you look for the symptoms of that, whether it's just the energy. Maybe he does need to sort of get up, do something different, and also getting back to the idea that there are different sorts of uses of technology. So it used to be television. That you didn't want children to watch television because they were turning into zombies, and now it's understandably switched to other things. But there's such a vast difference between having a child watch an hour of David Attenborough and having a child watch an hour of just complete rubbish. So I think if your child is problem solving, learning, being creative during that time, that's a really great use of technology. And also that technology can be used, and I do know of children with sort of social interaction that they find that difficult, then the technology actually, because it's not full face-to-face interaction, it can actually be a nice way for people with autism to be interacting with other people. So there's just some ideas on that topic, but to other people.
I agree with Matt in the sense that he sounds like he's actively using technology. He's not passively just sitting kind of, it's not just coming out, which then I would actually be worried. But he's learning things, he's being creative, and I think that, as you said, is like amazing and really positive. There are lots of claims around how technology is bad for people's brains. I'm not entirely sure there's a lot of evidence to support those claims. But there is some evidence to show that the use of technology improves fine motor skills, creativity. It has loads of benefits too. So I'm not sure I'd be hugely worried about him using technology in that way. I guess the kind of decisions that you and lots of other parents and teachers will make are what I think of as kind of everyday ethical decisions, because his use of using technology, or even football, playing football, doing something a lot, might prevent them from doing other things or giving them other opportunities that that might lead to other interests or other skills being developed. And I think that's I mean, I just think that's a really difficult decision that you have to make on a kind of basis. Because I often get this, talk about this with teachers and parents with regards to friendships. So lots of, when you're in school, lots of teachers want to ensure that kids are out there, autistic kids are out there playing with other, non-autistic peers. And when you actually speak, we've done some research with autistic kids, and when you speak to the autistic kids, they're kind of like, well, I don't want to go out there. I'm like, I want to stay in here, and I've been interacting with everyone in the classroom. I'm a bit stressed now. I want to just chill out on my own. Do something, and that's a kind of really ethical decision, because the kid doesn't want to do that, but the teachers are kind of almost forcing them to play with other kids, and that's where I think you've got to have like your constant. I think these decisions need to be made explicit, which you are doing clearly because you're thinking about it, and. Because on the one hand, in the case of friendships, you obviously want to empower them with the skills in order to be able to have friends whenever they want to choose to want to. But at the same time, you don't want to kind of put them in situations where they might be more anxious or might be kind of just wanting to chill out. And it's the same for your kind of situation as those. And I don't know what the answer is.
Same for soccer, actually. I don't think sports can be equally as ugly and strange. Thomas, do you have a view on that question?
I'll be quick because we're quite running quick on time. I mentor a lot of kids on the spectrum, and because of that, I understand the need and the want for technology and to spend time doing what you love. When you're facing a world that is intensely hostile to you, I'm speaking in exaggerations, of course, you want to stick to what brings you joy. I would say it would be great to start off, if you want them to spend less time away from the computer screens, find groups where that kid, your child, can socialize whilst using technology. There are a variety of websites, Facebook groups, that are meetups for parents who have kids on the spectrum, who are writers, who are gamers and big fans of movies. And it's always good to set these types of social groups up, because there will always be someone else like you who's like that. And through that, you can have your kids hang out together. Another thing is a lot of people see gaming as a bad thing, but it's actually the interaction between you and that environment that's very useful. And that's why I always encourage things like Minecraft and Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. So,
is it possible, because I felt you were wrapping up, is that your wrap-up tone? You were just about to wrap
that
up?
was my
I just wanted to say a 5-second
tone.
thing. I don't think you can make a mistake. I don't think it's possible. I think the fact you're thinking about it, you're actively being philosophical about it, I think it's always going to be the right thing. I think there's Schopenhauer's telescope, where is the idea that what if you were to put yourself 50 years in the future, you turn the telescope around, look back at your life now and think, well, what could I have done differently? And I think you just can't predict all the little elements of the little micromanagement of little parts of life. I think you're thinking about it, have as much take as you want, be guilt-free, balance it if you want to, do whatever happens. And that's not to take away the consequences of thinking, but the fact that you're not just letting it passively happen, you're being reflective. I think you can't go wrong. So enjoy, guilt-free, relaxing, life is wonderful, have fun with tech and go ahead with it in that way.
And soccer.
And soccer.
If I may actually add one final thought, I'm going to tell you a story. It's going to be a quick one. So I grew up playing massive amounts of computer games. I was on the computer hours and hours and hours. And at a certain point, I was aware that I'm experiencing strain in my eyes. However, it was a way for me to learn. So it was a learning tool as well as a platform for comfort and reinforcing different aspects. But my grandmother stepped in and she was watching my games. She noticed that I was playing a lot of concepts in steampunk. So she looked at the screen. She's like, oh, your grandpa has an old watch like that. Do you want to open it together and see what's inside? Do you think it's like exactly like the game is? And that is actually what started a new passion, which was cosplay. So what I would see on the screen, I was able to. We need to talk after.
We talked about cosplay earlier. Yeah.
So again, it transported to something that wasn't necessarily screen and or screen oriented, but I was applicating some of the technologies that I was learning in the game to build my costumes and then go at conventions and, socialize with different groups that were doing the same thing and see what they're building, because, you have to stay on top of these things. So it's use this passion that he has for technology, and it's beautiful that he has this passion. Use this as a platform to transition to other things as well.
Precisely, couldn't say it better. One more question, and then we'll go for our quick short break. Over there.
I have a little fella who's 7 who it breaks my heart to say he couldn't care less about technology, and except for memorising Disney films.
No one fights like this, don't know
But I actually teach robotics in a mainstream public school in Sydney, and as much as I try and get him in, he's not interested. But there are a lot of kids with autism who are, and what I've found is that it really has opened up my understanding of how they're collaborating with other kids, mainstream kids and other autistic kids, and I've seen a huge difference in them collaborating, which they haven't otherwise been able to do in other areas of the curriculum. And I'd be interested to hear from you, do you think that robotics as like a subject can improve collaboration between students with autism and their peers? It's a really interesting area that I'm actually researching at the moment.
I really want to answer this, but I'll leave it to you guys.
Answer it, Thomas. I'd like to hear your view, of course.
So, something that I've learnt amongst being a teacher's aide and a mentor is that when a person on the spectrum wants to hang out with people, he sees or she sees those who are really popular, and because they want to be a part of that, they see just that popularity and going, oh, I would like a piece of that, I'll try and hang out with them. Then their social oddities come out and they get picked on, and then their depression goes sky high and their self-confidence goes down low. But when kids on the spectrum have an opportunity to showcase their talents and strengths amongst their neurotypical partners, it gives them an excellent opportunity to build that social and that confidence sky high again. So by having these types of subjects that would build upon those skills would be phenomenal. At least that's from an Aspie point of view. You guys? This is about you guys.
I can also add a little bit. So robotics is a pretty new technology, and I think that what it has in addition is the tangible aspect of it, because you have this 3D body that moves, and you can. Oh, I really wanted to do that. Yeah. I really wanted to do that too. It was so hard to not do it. Thank you. So it has this tangible aspect to it, and sometimes this can help us transition to different things. So if your child, you mentioned that he is not really leaning towards technology at all, is not something that he is drawn to, but you might just expose him to a robotic tool and see if he interacts with other parts of it. Maybe not necessarily being eager that it's, oh my gosh, it's a robot and it's moving, but maybe being eager of the shapes he sees or of the different interactions that he can have with it. It's remarkable. Each individual is so different and so wonderful in their own way. And sometimes just by being exposed to something, you learn about passions that you never even, or skills that you never even knew or imagined you could have.
And
so, go.
I was going to say, if If it still hasn't persuaded him afterwards, then you can always take him to Disney World to see those animatronics. Now, unfortunately, we have to bring things to a close right now for a short break so that we can get those demonstrations set up. All right, we are starting up again. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you one of the very special ladies from Aspect, Susan Bruck, and a very special robot who's called Now, who we'll see now. Okay.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And a very big thank you to Sam Kingsley, who's actually running the robot today. We've done training sessions this morning, and he stayed on to do the presentation, made it so much easier for me. Thank you. And thank you, Thomas. You're doing a fabulous job, as ever. So, good evening, everyone. The first Aspect School started in 1966 with 6 students. Today, there are more than 1,000 students in Aspect schools. Even in the earliest days, the teachers were introducing innovative technologies and into the classrooms. And they conducted research studies, even back then, to evaluate the effectiveness of the machines that they were using. These were the early computers and the early technologies. And this tradition continues. Aspect continually evaluates all the programs that we run in our schools. And they're investigating the new technologies as they become available. The Now robot is one such study, and I'm very excited about him. And if a picture says 1,000 words, then a robot demonstration tells a story. I'm going to hand over to Now, our latest classroom recruit, to tell you about how we're trialling this robot in Aspect classrooms. Take it away.
Thank you, Thomas. That was a very interesting panel discussion.
I do my best.
Let me introduce you to Dr. Susan Bruck, Senior Research Officer at Aspect. Susan and I are currently investigating if robot-assisted lessons improve student outcomes. Susan has been researching assistive technology, in particular the use of virtual reality environments for autism education since 2005. That's right, isn't it, Susan?
It certainly is now.
At Aspect, assistive technology is an important part of our education program. To ensure Aspect school students receive evidence-based programs, our research team conducts the research studies in the schools. Tonight, you have heard about the LAMP communication device, which supports student communication. The research aspects conducted showed that students made significant gains in their communication when using the LAMP device. In our most recent study, I have been asked to work with the students on developing their navigation skills. For the early year students, we can learn through playing games where I can follow a ball around a maze. During these games, we can work on concepts such as left, right, over, under, through and across as we play in the maze. For middle year students, we can write programming code to walk to a specific location. On the journey, we can measure distance, work out what time we will arrive, and discuss the physics of my mechatronic body. For example, we could plan a trip to the bus stop and work out how to get home. All this work can include class teamwork and lots of communication and social skills practice. I can be quite an emotional robot. Would you like to see a few of my emotions?
Go ahead.
Okay, here we go.
What do you think he's thinking? Which emotion? Yeah. Tired, exhausted. He's sad. Did anyone get enjoyment and happy? Now he's got one more trick. Would you like to do a dance? Let's see.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. Oppan Gangnam
Thank you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, Susan, and now. And now, not now, but now we are off to show, Alyssa is about to show us about LAMP technology. Is that right? Oh, thank God I got it right in one. Okay, so she's going to show us just how important this is to people in the world today. And I'm not just talking to, keep on stalling for the time. There we go. Okay, now here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Alyssa.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Geez, well, something to follow up. Wow, sorry, I'm not doing any singing and dancing today. Hello everyone, my name is Alyssa. I'm a speech pathologist with Aspect. What a fantastic discussion. I was sitting there nodding my head vigorously the whole time because LAMP is a therapy approach that is really helping support our children to be able to access a lot of the assistive technology that the panel here were talking about. I'm going to try my best to condense 6 years of research into 10 minutes, so let's get ready to go. LAMP, as Trev mentioned earlier, stands for Language Acquisition Through Motor Planning. It's a therapy approach that was developed by John and Cindy Halloran in the United States. The focus is on the use of motor patterns and repetitious movements to teach communication skills. So think of driving, riding a bike, typing, how repetitious and over time they become automatic to you. That's the idea behind LAMP. So the idea is that these help our people to develop language and new vocabulary naturally without having to be taught each single word. So there's lots of positive outcomes that have been reported around the world by therapists and families using the LAMP approach, particularly at the South Coast School in the Illawarra where I'm based. There's a lot of studies starting to happen, but there's a lot of studies in the infancy around motor planning and language acquisition. As now mentioned, that our colleagues at Aspect conducted in 2012 is actually the largest in the world at the moment. So it's still growing, and like these guys mentioned before, we're kind of moving forward and moving backwards around this space. So as part of the LAMP therapy approach, we need to have an assistive technology system that uses semantic compaction or min-speak. So these devices at the front are examples of the particular systems. The communicator uses these systems where the icons stay exactly the same. They stay in the same place, they never move, no matter what device you are using the LAMP app or the min-speak system on. That way it continues that repetitious, continuous movements and they can use it in any context that they need to. So the key components of the LAMP therapy approach include the readiness to learn, engaging the learner through shared attention, learning language through a consistent and unique motor plan paired with auditory signals and a natural consequence, which is in itself assistive technology. Sorry, I'm going really fast and I'm aware of that, but I need to get through it all. So this is, if we have a look at the principles of LAMP with some of the key characteristics of autism in terms of learning and motor planning, we can see that it's a perfect match for supporting an individual to use assistive technology and their communication skills. Think back to what our panellists were saying earlier around predictability, choice and control. LAMP is predictable because the voice output from the systems stays the same. We remove the emotion, we remove the intonation, we remove the human element of communication, which makes it more static, predictable, and it gives our autistic people a choice over how they want things to be said and the way they want things to be said. So what does it look like at our little school? So as Trevor mentioned, we have 135 students enrolled at the school. He did say 51, but we had another child prescribed a device today. So we have 52 students using speech generating devices, which is an incredible number of students using assistive technology every day to engage in their communication, to engage in their education, and most importantly, improving their quality of life. Just a bit of, I guess, tech language. Speech generating device is just a fancy word for just a way to describe a computer-based technology that when a button is pressed, a voice output occurs. So although South Coast School, we're doing some really world-first engagement in that LAMP therapy approach using this particular system, I think it's really important to think about when it comes to assistive communication supports that this isn't the be-all or end-all. I think that the example before of having, fantastic engagement with technology versus not really wanting to be engaged is very similar with assistive and alternative communication support. So although we're doing some great things with LAMP, it doesn't mean that we're not going to encourage students to use whatever system works best for them. And some of the more well-known communication systems using assistive technology are on the presentation. We've got GoTalks, Prologue Quo to Go, and the LAMP Words for Life app. And there is a variety of reasons why we use the assistive technology or the AAC, Alternative Augmentative Communication, for a student. It may be that they have no functional verbal skills, so they need to have a functional communication system. It may be that they need some support with their articulation and they are not very well understood, so need a functional support to help that. It may be that their social skills are a bit of a deficit and they need some support to up those, or it may be that when they become incredibly frustrated, their ability to reason, their ability to use their higher order thinking skills and their language skills disappears, and using a system is a much easier way for them to be able to communicate to us. So I guess the fantastic thing about LAMP is that it's building students' communicative competences to then be able to access the curriculum and then to be able to access technology like now. So when a student is identified as benefiting from assistive technology, we've got a really great process at our school that takes place where the students are identified as potentially benefiting from assistive technology. We do lots of observation and assessment to track data and make sure that we're able to, track their progress over time. That, I suppose, really helps in regards to engaging the students with that technology for a long period of time and reducing the incidences of device abandonment because it is too hard or it is too much to incorporate into the everyday, which is why we have a fantastic system that involves not just the student but their family, all of the staff that are in their class or even on their school site, our executive of the school are involved, and also our community. So we run parent workshops, and we've got the autism friendly community in Carell as well that is helping support bring communication aid and assistive technology in the forefront of our community, which is fantastic. So the best way I thought that we could demonstrate how LAMP works, is actually to have the students demonstrate it for you. So please enjoy some of the success that we have had with this technology. Here they go. Wow! Oh, look! Some more. Yeah, there's bubbles on top right there. We're gonna watch the bubbles. Okay, let's watch them. Watch the bubbles go. Come on, Ben. Okay. Okay then. Some more. Okay. Wow.
Blue. Shirt. Blue shirt.
You have a blue t-shirt. I like it. Me too. Mine is dark blue. It's so cool.
Pink. Shorts. Pink shorts.
Yeah, you have pink shorts. I like the shorts. They have sparkles. Very pretty.
2. Watch. T. A. N. G. A. TH. Dream. I want to watch Teenage Dream.
Oh, I think we can watch Teenage Dream.
She loves Katy Perry.
Green?
Get.
Yeah.
We get. Cow.
We get Pan the cow.
Cow.
Yeah, we get Pan the cow.
Yeah.
Turn the page.
We.
Green. Get.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah, Ben is a boy. We
Ben.
get Ben.
Ben.
Yeah.
We get.
Dog.
Yeah.
Let's make it go up. Up, up. Build it up, build it up. Just a minute. Build it higher. Build it up and up and up into the sky. My turn. Build it up, build it up, build it higher. Build it up and up and up into the sky.
Make it go down. And we go down.
Down.
Ready, set. Ready, set.
Go.
Build more.
More.
So that's just a brief demonstration of what LAMP can do and the power that it has for our students. I definitely implore you to come and have a go with the technology because it is hard to see from where you're sitting, but this is just a very brief demonstration. If you are interested in learning more about LAMP, there is training coming up, so this is the website to look at for training around this particular assistive technology. Thank you.
And now for a very quick demonstration of his excellent technologies, we've got the Willy Wonka of tech, Craig Smith.
I'm going to show you 3 very quick things, and I'll just spend 60 seconds each as our little closure. The first thing that I want to show you is Makey. Can see hands up, the teacher and me. If anyone's used Makey or seen Makey in their classroom, we have a couple, so I can assume the rest have not seen it as much. Makey is a little circuit board that connects to the computer. So it just plugs in to the USB port on any computer, and it comes with alligator clips. And the alligator clips, when they plug into any tactile thing, like an apple, like Play-Doh, anything that can conduct touch, so the sort of conductivity, the slight electrical charge of touch. So think water, think lead pencil. You can control the computer by touching these objects. Now, why that's interesting, and we can just get Chrome, is that cool? Yeah, it logged off. You're a good man. I'll just type in the address. So I'll just do makeymakey.com, and we're going to go /piano, and then I'm going to play a quick piano so I've got a banana, another banana, I've got some Play-Doh, I could apple. The skin is tricky sometimes, so we can go straight into the juice, so I can do this too. And you can think, well, that's very cool because you can make music and play with apples and bananas and Play-Doh and water and what have you. But, and no, you've seen this, Thomas, yes. You can also play games. So you can play Minecraft. You don't need to use a computer. You could get aluminium foil, take your shoes off, walk on the foil, hook it up to Makey. Your character walks. You can make a little pickaxe from Lego, tap it on the ground, and the character in the game does the mining. So that stuff is very, very cool. Makey. It sounds like I'm doing like a Denos Direct sort of thing. It's not too expensive.
1-800.
It's fun. It's accessible. We might plug in the phone. Very, very quick demonstration of augmented reality, because I think this stuff is very fun, that Matt was talking a bit about earlier. So I'm just going to plug in the phone here. This is an app called Playground AR. I don't know if you've seen this particular app. What it lets you do, I'm just going to clear the space, is it, so you can see this, the floor, you're all there. I am just going to build some blocks up onto the floor there, and if this cord sort of let me walk around, you can see it's actually on the, oh, that's fine. You can see that's there. Maybe I want to add a helicopter instead of blocks. So Thomas, I'm just going to put that by your feet. Okay. And I'm going to fly this helicopter up there. You can see it's sort of going up into the roof.
It's under attack!
And if Thomas had an iPhone or an iPad or whatever, you could join in, so we could have a collaborative shared space. So Thomas could add blocks, he could add things in, have different sort of physics reactions. You think?
Now, can I kick the blocks or anything?
Not yet. One day, if you were wearing augmented reality shoes, you'd be able to. So this is interesting because you think, well, why wouldn't you just play with blocks? Why would you want to synthesize this into tech? Blocks aren't motivating to everybody. They're not accessible to everybody. This might, for some children, be that little thing where they're like, I want to build blocks. I want to make a creative space where they can build and construct all sorts of things like Minecraft in the real world. So I think that's very cool. Last thing that I wanted to show you is this thing called Squitch. Oh, I'll keep plugged in, I'm sorry. Squitch is a little multi-use controller. It's got a soft button on top. It comes from some developers over in Scotland. They make a musical instrument called Skoog, and Skoog is a squishy cube where each side of this cube has a different colour, and when you hit the cube, it Bluetooths to a device, and you can play different notes and music that's activated by that. What Squitch does that I've got here is SKW, there we go. I'm just going to put Squitch in this little, going to put the phone in the caddy. So I'm going to get connected, I'm going to slide Squitch in like that. Okay, I'll close the lid so it locks the phone in place, just works with a smartphone. Now what I'm going to do is just with a single button, so single button press, it's going to progress through these notes. So each time I take my finger off, it goes on to the next note. See if you can recognise the song. Okay, so you can play, and depending on how hard you touch, and you can even do vibrato by sort of going, and you could all sorts of sort of sensitive touch. You can change the instrument, you can have it talk to other applications, so it doesn't have to be the Switch app. If you've got particular synthesizer apps, music apps, it can do all that stuff too. It can be an assistive communication device in that it can act as a switch, so the same way you might activate something like LAMP, ProLoco Go through switch control, you can do that. You can use it for coding as well, so you can use it as a switch to activate particular elements of coding. That's what I wanted to show you. AR, makey, squitch. I think we're at time, Thomas.
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
How have we learned so much about technology and the amazing things that can come from it? I'd like you guys to thank our fantastic panelists. The lovely people who introduced us to some awesome tech today. My name is Thomas Kuzma. If you want to check me out on Twitter or on Instagram, I'm TK_Hubworld. And I hope you guys have a lovely night. It's Friday. Go party. Go to town. We're in Sydney. And, there's all this other stuff about lockout laws, but we won't go into that. Enjoy your day, enjoy your night, and, well, have fun with your technology. Bye.